Ladies and gentlemen, this is internet personality Vangelus, and I want to set sail with you into the waters of mastermind creations. This is the Night Morpher Cyclops, a seaborne titan based on the Hearts of Steel shockwave design from a few years back. He's one of the largest standalone third-party releases to date, and I already covered his surprise companion in an earlier video, so let's hit the deck and check out the main attraction. This battleship is 15 inches long. The scale it presents is marvelous. It's also well detailed, with rivets, portholes, cannons, and ridges all over its huge surface area. The colors are really gorgeous, mixing a deep purple with a lighter hue that looks almost silver under certain lighting conditions. The two guns can swivel, and there's an undocumented pair of stand pieces on the bottom of the ship that allow it to balance happily on a flat surface for display. It's also a surprisingly solid mode given its construction. While it can be squeezed out of alignment with enough pressure, I was impressed by just how much pressure that took. That said, I wouldn't recommend squeezing this that much. There's a lot of tabs in there, and I suspect a lot of squeezing can also lead to a whole lot of breaking. The side of the hull can fold open on one side to deploy the anchor. With a hardcore metal chain and jagged bladings, the anchor is pretty badass. It can plug into the inner ceiling of the front of the ship pretty solidly, but getting it to store within is tricky. The angle is very precise that you have to set the anchor to, and the instructions don't give a very clear picture of what to do. I just kinda had to futz with it a while, and then pester a mastermind guy on TFW to see if it actually can happen, and he said yeah, so I kept futzing with it, and boom. Futz away, ladies and gentlemen. Futz away. Beneath the front of the ship, a three-part door opens to allow the included Morpher Cyclops submarine to dock or deploy. This is a great concept and adds a bit of fun to both figures' play patterns. While one can see a few indents and a peg on the inner ceiling of the docking area, it's pretty hard to actually lock the submarine onto them without jostling it out of shape. However, the front of the sub plugs into the docking area quite rigidly, so you'll be set either way. Just close the doors. Also, if you have everything loaded into the ship, the thing gets very satisfyingly heavy. But let's advance beyond all of these accoutrements and show the next logical step of evolution. Let's get this clear. Cyclops can be very frightening to transform. Really, his conversion process is very clever and sensible, and I only needed instructions the first time through. But there are a lot of small tabs involved, and any moment of carelessness can lead to one breaking off. Heed the advice of the instructions and apply gentle downward pressure to help unlock the heavier tabs. And in general, just take your time and control your strength. Warnings aside, I love the way the process looks. Mastermind Creations really went balls out and gave it their all in pulling this off, and I very much appreciate the engineering. It's not a transformation scheme I've seen attempted before, and that is commendable. The only place where I've found major issue is the formation of Cyclops' backpack. The instructions try very hard to be clear on what happens, but this is by far one of the scariest moments the first time through, or even second or third times through. The key is to ensure that the maximum amount of space is being provided by the gray double joints that hold the purple strips together. Clearance is absolutely minimal here, and I recommend extreme caution until you're comfortable with how it works. Then, I only recommend mild caution. The rest of the transformation is a cool head reveal, and overall I've found that I respect the conversion process for what it does. And after a few runs back and forth, I've come to start to enjoy it. But having said that, there are a few points of concern I really want to highlight. Okay, the first point of concern is actually multiple points of concern all along the bottom of the ship. There are a bunch of tabs. Specifically, there are some ringed here, some ringed around here, and a couple up here. And these are all things to be careful with. There are other tabs on this dude. Up here, there are a couple. Here, and here, and here, and here. And the instructions even make a point of telling you how to not break these ones. But I think these ones are at greater risk because there's so many of them, it's easy to have casualties. If you're going to transform this dude, I want to do a transformation video on this guy later just to see if I can help out. I'd recommend using those little folding things and then wibble this around and open it up from down here first. When you do that, it's much easier to lift the whole wing up and out, and you don't have to worry about it. Don't untab this stuff first, basically. Do all the untabbing down here. Speaking of tabs breaking, I am not a perfect transformer. I'm not even a transformer, but basically, I'm sure you might have noticed a couple times by now, a couple of very suspicious-looking white marks. That's because I do have a pair of broken tabs right up here. There were two little tabs sticking out there. There are still a couple tabs in here. You can see one there. And I still have all the tabs over here. They were basically the crossways tabs to these two. Those two broke off because I was not very careful with putting this guy together, and I didn't really know how to put this guy together or take him apart. I lost both tabs actually not at the same time. One on transformation number 2, first time I went back to boat mode. Another one on transformation like 6 or 8. But transforming him back to boat mode, I think, is where the greatest risk is, because you're trying to figure out how this all sandwiches together, and be careful. Another point of concern is when you're sliding his chest together. Now, you may have noticed that this whole thing here slides in like that, so this piece goes into a rail that's right here. That's the part that you don't have to worry about. On the back are the parts you do have to worry about, because that is not the only way that the chest connects together. There are a couple of little tabs. There's 2 of them. I'll just show you one for now. And when you slide this whole thing together, this little tab here slides into a little L-shaped matching divot there. And when you do it right, they just slide together. Now, those tabs have not shown any stress marks, but I would be really careful with them, because they are integral to holding this guy's torso together. And when transforming him back to boat mode, I've found that I can't really slide them back out the way they came, so much as I try to actually push them a little bit farther so they release, and then lift this off. Don't pull up on it. Make sure you are pushing in this direction, this way, so that the tension is released and then lifted up, and it should lift off gently. If it's not lifting off gently, don't pull, because you do not want to lose these tabs. Again, mine don't show any sign of breaking, but they worry me. So be careful. Also, keep an eye out on this shin part here. Now, it's on a little arm in here, and the thing that I discovered, somewhat accidentally, is that the outer plate here is actually a separate piece from the inner arm, and if you can see the seam line here, that's where they're glued together. Now, the instructions and the transformation pretty much tell you to pull this thing up and then slide it forward. Try to make as much of that done by pushing on this arm as possible, because if you try to use this piece as a handle, it's very easy to break the bond of the super glue in here and snap it off and then have to re-glue it. Now, I've re-glued this and it's been pretty damn solid the whole time. Just bear in mind that right in here, that big square there is part of this piece, but there's something slotted up in there which is part of that piece. They're separate, they're glued together. If it breaks, do not worry. You just gotta re-glue it and then let it set before you try transforming him again. That's my final point of concern. This guy is around 10 inches tall and loaded down with sculpted surface detail. You have to look inside his armor pieces to find flatness, and even then, a few of those inner areas have got detailing added in. Surfacing aside, I love this guy's head sculpt and giant boots. His stance solidity is obscene thanks to all the contact he has with the ground, and his light-piped yellow eye once again shows that Mastermind Creations know how to make some goddamn translucent plastic goddamn glow. An intimidating giant Gatling gun hand rounds off the obvious shockwave homages in Cyclops. His wing backpack has some cool jet booster pods, and takes an interesting approach to staying out of the way. The pods can swivel around on the backpack, and the wing panel packs can swivel independently on the central axis of each of the pods. This gives you a lot of options in how you want the backpack to be arranged, and means it's pretty easy to keep it out of the way of poseability. Weaknesses in his robot mode's appearance really just come down to small gaps. There are a few in his midsection, but the main offenders are his shoulders. While you can get them looking solid, it's quite easy to have them turned down at his side in a way that makes light of their less natural connections to his torso. Not a huge problem, but it sticks out only due to how utterly solid the rest of his body looks. So this guy's big, and he's got joints, and I want to clear up right now, a majority of his joints are clicky joints. So he's able to hold a lot of decent poses without crumbling under his own weight, which was kind of the first thing I wanted to check on him. I also want to point out that one of his non-clicky joints is his neck, which is a ball joint, and it is wonderfully expressive. As for his shoulders, they both work in similar ways. They've got, forward and backward motion, outward motion, they've got elbows and bicep swivels, but all these things work in slightly strange ways, and identically on both of them as well. Pretty much, the forward and backward motion is jointed here in the center of the torso. This is kind of odd, but oddly enough, for such an odd thing, it doesn't look too weird. It looks weird if you do this. Nah, that's unseemly, so don't do that. But other than that, it kind of works out okay. It's thanks to the big shoulder pads. This shoulder pad does a decent job of covering for it. It can move, too, with that kind of awful noise. This one, the shoulder pad is just so enormous that you really can't notice the weirdness of that shoulder placement. So, props there. They've got a separate joint for their outward shoulder motion. It's inside each of the shoulder pads, and that works pretty fine. The elbows on this guy, they're not super posable. They can bend almost 90 degrees, but this one works a lot better. And when you're using this one, I'd recommend putting your finger on the back and doing this, otherwise you might start collapsing the arm in instead of actually bending it. And as you can see, like, it's almost 90 degrees of posability, and that's okay. This one, unfortunately, just stuff bangs together, and you can go about that far. Which is kind of a bummer. All of these blockages, though, and these weird placements, I think are just due to the design that Mastermind have chosen to cover with Cyclops, and because of that, I'm kind of okay with it. I think they did a really good job just given the aesthetics of this guy based on Guido's line art. So, you might not like the limitations, but personally, I'm okay with them. As for his actual hand, it is jointed. It's kind of masterpiece jointed. It's got the ball-jointed thumb, 3 fingers jointed together, and then an index finger jointed separately. And the bummer is that there's no mid-knuckle joints, and I only really wanted one, that being on here, so he could point. Basically, I was hoping his hand would turn out like MP10 Optimus Prime's, but it didn't. Nonetheless, I mean, this is still pretty decent. I'm just spoiled by newer toys. And, this thing can get some good motion going. It does bang into stuff in here, but as long as the fingers are closed, you can spin it more or less how you want to spin it. If you have the fingers open, you're going to be a bit more limited. I like that there's joints in there, and I love all these rivets. Rivets everywhere. Ooh. So that's his upper body. Let's go into the lower body. His waist is jointed. Unfortunately, being jointed means it actually ends up being a little bit disappointing because it can only move this far. The midsection bangs against this crossbar, and this crossbar can't be moved out of the way. And it's a shame, because, I mean, these things can fold up, which, to me, would allow for this thing to turn even farther. But unfortunately, it hits the crossbar. So, you know, it tried hard, and it came a little far, but not quite far enough. You do get a little bit of emotion out of this joint, though, which is what I really want at the end of the day, and I'm glad it's there in some fashion. The skirt that's attached to that crossbar can fold out of the way for his legs, and his legs are on universal ratcheting joints. I'm going to show you the other parts of his legs, though. He's got this clicky thigh swivel, which works happily. His knees can actually bend pretty far on this really nice clicky joint, and I didn't think they'd be able to get like a full 90-degree style bend out of these, just because look at the size of his shins, man. But the actual hip joint, the outward motion is pretty okay. And these things can get out of the way as well. His arm can also get out of the way. If you want to have him pose doing like a standing karate kick, you might be a bit disappointed. This thing can hold the pose if you're very careful, but due to the sheer mass and weight of this leg, if I tap it, it's going to fall back down. Now, in normal standing poses, that won't be an issue, but just be aware of it if you do want him to do a high kick, because, you know, you've got my condolences. The forward and backward motion, it works, and it's solid, but it makes the worst sound. I don't know if that sound means something's getting ground to paste like it meant with TFC Toys Heavy Labor, but I don't like that sound. It's just kind of ugly, especially when you have such a pretty clicky sound right next to it. The final thing to talk about in his posability would be his feet, and they are actually one of my favorite parts of this guy, because they are so huge. He's able to maintain a lot of standing poses. Look at the sheer surface area that is gripping the ground. And then, furthermore, they are able to tilt enormously. The heel tilts separately due to the design, which I don't think really offers any advantages. It just means you have to tilt 2 parts. But look at how far these things can tilt. This is really cool, because it means he can hold a lot of really wide-legged stances and not, like, keel over. It does also mean that if you have a slippery table, he may just sort of very slowly slide into the splits, so pay attention to that. The final joint, and this is something I really wasn't expecting. Dude has a toe joint. And this toe joint can actually kind of work, again, because the plate is so big, and the ankle tilts are so numerous and so wide, he can actually maintain a pose where he's standing on 1 toe and 1 foot. It's not, like, super solid, like, you know, it's solid enough for display, but if you do, you know, smack him around, he'll kind of fall back onto his heel. But all that put together makes for a dude that is, while not hyper-posable, really decently posable for such a complex and completely insane design. So many props to Mastermind Creations for that and for their continued victory at the art of light piping. The anchor becomes a chained and bladed melee weapon if you so choose. It now attaches to Cyclops' left forearm, and the anchor itself can plug into his back. Unfortunately, the connection on my anchor to his back is rather hit or miss, and the weight of the chain has more than once forced it to fall off of its mounting point. Cyclops does look pretty cool with it on, though, and it makes for a neat throwback to the wire that was attached to the original Shockwave's forearm. It also gives his posable right hand something to do, aside from, insert deleted Shafter review line. One thing Mastermind revealed to us when this guy started to show up at TF Source was that he has a little bit of an arrangement with this little mini-submarine, in that this thing can work like a transtector. So, it's been stated by Mastermind that the transtector connection stuff is something they wanted to leave for people to kind of discover on their own, and I think I found 2 places where this guy can go. The first is his normal Battleship storage area. Now you can much better see what I was talking about. Basically, this piece and this piece, the peg hole and the square, go into that square indent and that little peg there. When he's in boat mode, this is almost impossible to do, but now that you have far more open access, you can kind of just now it's mounted in place. You can close up the hatch, and this transtector point, it's I think the most solid, but also the most hilarious, because it means that Cyclops' little buddy is now mounted inside of his forearm, which means that whenever he punches dudes, it's kind of rough. There's one other transtector point that I found, though, and it is around the back here. I've splayed open the backpack to reveal this little nodule. I was staring at that for a while, wondering what that was for, and I noticed that it kind of matched up with the shape of this. So if you open up the backpack wide enough, and then you very carefully line that part up and then press in a little bit gently, because if you press too hard, or especially if you press on these parts, the whole submarine will just collapse because of the way it's designed. This little guy can kind of peg on like that, and then for security's sake, you can close the backpack up around him a little bit. It's the most tenuous connection in the world, but when it works, it's kind of cool, because now the little dude looks a lot more transtectory, because he's like this little generator that's plugged into Cyclops' back. And I kind of dig that. It's a neat way to merge the two. I'm trying to get the anchor to mount back there at the same time. I wouldn't really bother. You can do it, but it's really crazy risky, because the anchor already is kind of loosely on there, and attaching this guy always seems to just knock the anchor off, and you try to put the anchor, up here, and then this little guy falls off, and this guy's all like, "What you doing behind in my junk?" And you're all like, "Yo, you do what I tell you to." Logic, logic, logic. Anyway, transtectoring, ladies and gentlemen. I think it's cool. I just hope that, if they do it again, it can have a bit more of like a dynamic, like crunk kind of locking mechanism. Cyclops is one of the largest and priciest third-party releases to date. He is not wrought with structural deficiencies like the original Night Morpher Commander, and feels about as durable as the Annihilator and subsequent Commander reissue. However, his very design pushes that durability to an entirely new extreme, leaving him still a slightly scary toy to mess with when first encountered. I think he's pretty cool, though. Cyclops realizes an unused Guido Guidi design that I have always loved, and executes some toy engineering concepts that really think outside the box, and impress on several levels. I do feel it's accurate when Mastermind Creations say that this is their attempt at a Masterpiece Transformer style of figure. And like many Masterpiece Transformers, it's not flawless. You need to be into the retro steampunk aesthetic of Cyclops' design, for one. You also need to be ready to handle the figure carefully and learn how it works at a slow pace to avoid damaging it. Cyclops asks for a lot of patience and a little risk from its purchaser, and that means for some, it may bring about frustrations that outweigh its qualities. Speaking for myself, after having transformed it over 10 times at the time of this recording, I've grown to really like what it does. The presentation, engineering, and inclusion of the Micromorpher submarine have all really impressed me, and overall, the qualities have won out, and I am glad to have this in my collection. Anyway, this has been Internet Personality Vangelus, and while it's not a perfect toy, I'm glad to see that Cyclops is another overall positive milestone for Mastermind Creations. Those guys have come a long way from the original Night Morpher Commander, and I hope they continue to grow and improve in their work. I look forward to the releases of Air Screech and Hexatron, and hope to see another step forward in quality once they're in hand. But that's enough from me. I've got to return to my submarine, to pass through the American patrols, past their sonar nets, and lay off their largest city, and listen to their rock and roll, while I conduct missile drills.